I'm Gummy Jonathan, and this is the miniview. In my opinion, the Nintendo Switch is still a console trying to find its own identity in comparison to the other systems of the Nintendo lineup. The 64 had revolutionary three-dimensional graphics, the GameCube had its shape and its compatibility with their handheld console, the Game Boy Advance. The DS had two screens, the Nintendo Wii had its motion control and expanded market audience, and the Wii U died on arrival. When I mention each of these systems, I'm sure one title in particular jumps to your mind first. For me, it would be Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64, Double Dash for the GameCube, Sonic Advance for the Game Boy Advance, Pokemon Platinum for the DS, Wii Sports for the Nintendo Wii, and Pikmin 3 for the Wii U. However, for the Nintendo Switch, the first thing I think of is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Not a bad game by any means, but it is a port from the Wii U. A port from the Wii U as a near-launch title for the Nintendo Switch, and it's still the highest-selling game on the console, with only Smash Ultimate lagging right behind it. On today's miniview, however, I want to talk to you about a game that should have received more recognition than it ever really got. This is a quaint little game that released in June of 2017, shortly after the Switch's launch. Outshadowed by many different games on the top of the Switch charts, including Ring Fit Adventure in 2019, and other ports of games such as Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe and DKC Tropical Freeze, ARMS is what you would classify as a true 3D fighter. You maintain a full 360 degrees of movement around the entire arena while fighting. This isn't just another punch-out boxing game though. No, you probably caught on by now that the fighting in this game is a bit unique. Each fighter has extendable arms due to a mutation in genetic code. This ability allows them to use their spring-like arms as projectiles during the bouts. Here's a fun fact, the ability can also be found in animal and plant life, according to the lore in-game. The game went through many different concepts and ideas before the conception of stretchy arms. The original idea by one of the head developers, Kosuke Yabuki, was if a fighting game in a third-person perspective was possible. Soon Yabuki realized that with a camera behind the player, it became difficult to judge the distance to your opponents. This spurred on the idea of projectile fighting, which grew into the stretchy, elastic arms that came to be the primary focus of the game. I just think the design process is very neat. Development out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. There are many modes in the game that you can play, but for starters, let's talk about the characters. Most of the cast of characters have clearly had love and care put into their design to not only flesh them out as a character and personality, but also create the main sense of style in the universe. Design-wise, they all fit into a scheme, or stereotype, perfectly, and they encompass that with their mannerisms and movement. Now each character has their own gimmick. It starts out pretty basic, from deflecting incoming attacks to more complicated things like becoming possessed by a spirit. In casual play, most players will probably just pick a character based on their looks or if their gimmick looks fun, but these playstyles are remarkably deep. For instance, Springman's ability is to deflect incoming arms or grabs after a charged dash. This can lead to some intense gameplay at higher levels and a lot of mind manipulation in the attempt to bait out attacks from your opponent. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got big brain characters like Helix who can stretch their body by holding jump or shrink themselves by holding dash. It's an interesting new way to dodge and weave through enemy projectiles. Springtron is a Springman clone whose ability is a one-up of Springman's. His dash charge can be held longer to break an opponent's arms if they're out in play. There are gimmicks galore here, but I don't think that takes away from the main game in any way. While there's a lot to be said about each character's playstyle and their required mindset, allow me to go over some of the simpler mechanics of the game. You have your general fight mode, which is probably why you're playing the game to begin with, along with some other party modes. There's Team Fight, Volleyball, Hoops, Skill Shot, Headlock Scramble, Arms Test, and 1-on-100 that can all be played solo versus an AI or multiplayer. Now about those party modes, Volleyball and Hoops need no introduction. I think you can gather what those are about, but Skill Shot is a test of your patience as you and an opponent directly across from you attempt to gather points by hitting targets and each other. And we'll come back to Headlock Scramble later. Arms Test is a special mode where you're given random arms to work with, and 1-on-100 is just that, you versus 99 training dummies and a headlock at the end. But let's step back a bit. We have to talk about Grand Prix, the focus for single-player content. In Grand Prix, you choose a character for a 10-fight marathon with 2 minigames mixed in. Depending on the difficulty you select, you could be in for 11 fights instead, as there are bosses at the very end from level 4 to level 7 difficulties. There's a bit of good and bad in Grand Prix mode, because while you do get to learn about each character's strengths and weaknesses, you also get to learn about one of the game's major drawbacks. The computer player AI is directly tied to your inputs, much like Smash Bros. It will adapt and 100% counter you if you're not crafty or creative, putting you into situations you will likely never see in a real multiplayer environment. This goes threefold for the bosses at the end of the Grand Prix. Now I can tell you about Headlock. Headlock is an ARMS laboratory creation that has gained sentience and run amok, capturing Max Brass at the end of the Grand Prix, just as you defeat him. He is the main boss of the Grand Prix mode. For context on Headlock, imagine, if you will, that you were in the middle of a street brawl when out of nowhere some mutated gangbanger with 6 arms shows up to beat you to death. That's Headlock. As stated, he's an ARMS lab creation, being a head with 4 arms attached to him, able to possess the body of any character and give them control of the extra arms in multiplayer. While Headlock is controlling / being controlled by a character, they still have access to their character specific abilities, meaning Headlock can truly be a nuisance when it comes to fighting certain combinations. Speaking of, Headlock Scramble is a party mode where a sphere containing a Headlock head is dropped into the arena, allowing one lucky fighter to control the beast for a limited time or until it's taken from them by another player. As far as controls go, each character feels a bit different to play. For instance, Ninjara moves around faster than any other character, so you definitely feel the difference in weight compared to a character like Master Mummy or Max Brass. I'm unable to control Helix to save my life, but top tournament players have used him quite effectively. My favorite characters to play as are Lola Pop and, surprisingly, Springman. Speaking of Springman, there's a special mode that I assume is used every month, maybe every few months, akin to Splatfests in Splatoon 2, and it's called Party Crash. During this week-long event, there's quite a few special game types that are only used during their set 5-minute long bonus time. Seriously, they're 5 minutes long. Like, you gotta get in on that. ARMS Lab Selects is basically the same as ARMS Tests, except online. You're given random arms to use in your bouts. So Much Rush is a mode where the rush meter fills up within 3 seconds, making the entire match a rush fest, one right after the other. One Hit Wonder makes the match a fierce head game between you and your opponent, as one hit will win the match. Too Much Headlock is 5 minutes of high-level headlock hell. Bombs Away is a mode with a completely normal fight match, save for the constant rain of bomb items on the field. There's actually way more than that even, but for the sake of time constraints I will refrain from spoiling them all. With all that said and done, Party Crash is a perfect way to segue into my next point of adoration here, the art design in the world of ARMS. Special art pieces are made into collectible badges for playing during the Party Crash events. Badge art isn't anything too special, but I feel the game truly shines through its art gallery and the way it tells its lore, through fun pieces and confidential secrets. You spend your points gained through battling and playing in the gallery, and you unlock these beautiful concept art renders and background pieces featuring the characters, which usually all have something interesting to say at the bottom. The sheer love put into the world building in this game is what made me want to review it in the first place, and what makes me hope they do something with the IP in the future. Although, if you're the type to make sure you're fully prepared before a fight, you can spend those points in the arm getter. There's 3 time limits you can choose from, but this is basically a glorified skill shot mode. You rack up points by hitting targets, and the more points you accrue, the more arms boxes appear for you to break to unlock arms for use on your characters. All arms start out as character specific, but through the use of the arms getter, you can acquire them for other characters as well. Alright, you've been waiting. Here's the big bulleted list that Gummy has of his problems with the game. 1. Sometimes the pacing is a bit weird in this game. The battles can either run way too short or way too long due to some arms balance being either completely useless or broken. Things like the Tri-Bolt and Tri-Blast I always use because of how effective they can be for working your enemies into your other arm. Other things like Scully and Scorpio I rarely use unless I'm messing around with my friends just to have fun. 2. Grabs. Grabs in this game are essential. I am hyper aware of that fact, due to how much they're spammed in online play. There's a bit of a weapon quadrilateral going on here, whereas grabs beat shields, jumps beat grabs, Jump grabs beat grabs, and punches beat grabs. Sounds really simple, but also really complicated, but you can't imagine how very in favor of grabs this game can be online. I once had a match where my enemy did nothing but shield and grab, like literally just holding shield and grabbing, and for some reason I couldn't do anything about it, because I'm an idiot. Piggybacking off what I just talked about, online play. I know I just bashed it, but this is more of a compliment than an insult. The online is very strict with network connection and disconnect. So if your internet speeds are bad, you probably won't be able to play online. However, for anyone not living under a rock in Massachusetts, the connections are pretty stable, and it's hilarious how Smash Ultimate can't come close to the stability ARMS has. But, when you do get connected with someone who is lagging, it lags hard and horribly. Hit detection is gone, you have no idea where anything is, objects and enemies jump and zoom around the map. It's like playing a Gmod server with 120 people. And here's the big one, content. As it stands today, in April of 2020, as I sit here and review this, ARMS has 15 different fighters, 2 major online modes being ranked and party, 1 single player mode without much story or context behind why it's happening, and a friends mode. Sounds expansive, but personally it lacks a bit of the gameplay loop that keeps you playing. None of the characters are unlockable, they're all open from the start, so you don't have any of the challenge of picking up a fighter just to win another one. The only thing you unlock are arms and badges, and you do that by playing. So if you don't like any of the arms at the start, it's more of an uphill battle for the game to win you over. It has charm galore, but you can only go so far with that for an impatient gamer. On release, the game only had 10 fighters, and I feel the game would have had a much better reception if it had released with the extra 5 that it has now. But I'll move on from that. The game's extra stuff is really awesome too. It has a dashboard which links you straight to a page where you can get in-depth guides on the characters, see the ARMS League rankings, and watch actual tournament footage to study up on to perfect your craft. The aforementioned gallery, which is my favorite bonus content, sits on this bar as well. You can also watch your last, 20 or so replays here as well. All of this, including badges, were missing from the product released back in 2017, so none of that was there. Anyway, all of the positive experience I've had with this game in my leisure and research during Nintendo's insane, absolutely insane game trials time, which lets you play the full game for free for 2 weeks, definitely makes me hopeful to see some more ARMS love in the future, and very excited for the new character in Smash. So let's go ahead and tally up the points and see what today's miniview score is. Carry the 1, 3, 5, 7, 8. And, I think I'm going to have to sit ARMS at a high score of 8.5 out of 10. ARMS is a wonderful little game that I had the pleasure of experiencing for 2 weeks, and I will definitely be dropping the full 60 on this game just to support the devs and hope for something new in the series. Hopefully you'll cop and enjoy the heck out of this as I have, and meet me in the party lobbies to get destroyed.